Welcome to this video on how to write a literature review. Your objectives are to understand the purpose of literature review, to explain how to write a literature review and its structure, and then we'll evaluate some common mistakes made when people write literature reviews, and that's something you're going to have to really think about when you're producing yours for your report. So what is literature review then? Essentially it's where you're going to explain all the historical research done around your topic. Okay? You'll describe and compare the schools of thought on an issue. So if there's some theories behind what you're doing, if you've done a psychological study, then you'll need to think about the theories or explain the theories to people. It's where you synthesize the available research. So instead of having people who want to read your report looking at all the literature behind it, you're going to explain that to them. Okay? It's an area for you to highlight and critique research methods. So all the journals that you've read about for your report, that's helped you design your methodology. It's your turn or time to critique them. What were the strengths and weaknesses of what you found? Okay, why have you done yours similar to one study and different from another? To note the areas of disagreement. So through all the studies that you've read, what's the differences? Okay, what's the similarities? Why have you decided to do what you've done? Okay. It's another area to highlight gaps in existing research. So basically justifying why you've decided to take on your study. Okay, and then obviously, or as I've already said, to justify the topic that you plan to investigate. Why is it important to the sports science field and all the research that's already been done? How are you and your study going to develop the field? Okay, so it's importance to the reader because it introduces the literature. Okay, it introduces the major topic area that you're going to be looking at. Okay, it identifies the broad problem area. Okay, again, as we go through this, you'll understand more, but it's not to go too global. Okay, don't go too broad. So if you're doing sports drinks, don't discuss the entire history of sports drinks. Just focus on, the sports that you're doing. So if you're doing Lucozade, focus with Lucozade. Okay. Finally, to discuss the general importance of your topic for those in your field. So if anyone reading it, why is your topic important? Why have you decided to do that? Okay, so writing a literature review. It's a difficult process in the sense that you have to write concisely and you have to get a lot of information into what is generally quite a short word count. Okay, so it's important that you don't try to cover everything written on that topic. You've got to be very specific with the literature that you discuss and make sure that that research is focusing on what your research topic is focusing on. Okay, you'll need to pick out the research most relevant to your topic, and you will use the studies in your literature review as evidence. Okay, that your research question is an important one. So again, it's about justifying why you're doing what you're doing. It's important to cover research relevant to all the variables being studied. Need a sip of tea, hang on. And to focus on research that explains the relationship between these variables. Okay. You'll need to plan how you'll structure your literature review and write from this plan. Okay, so it's very difficult to sit down and just start writing literature review without knowing kind of what you're going to do, what you're going to talk about first, second, third, fourth. Okay, and having that plan in your mind. So it's very worthwhile sitting down and doing that before you start. Okay, so these are the different types of order you can write literature reviewing. Okay, now these three in particular, I don't think are the best for sports science writing. They're in the next slide, but I'll let you know about them anyways. So topical order. So to organize by your main topics or issues and emphasize the relationship with the issues to the main problem. Okay, chronological order. So to organize literature that you're discussing by dates. All right, that might be better for historians and things. Problem, cause, solution order. To organize a review so that it removes the problem from the problem, to the solution. Okay, now the ones that I think are better for sports science and for us, okay, are the general to specific order or the specific to general order. Now, the one I would do if I were you, and what I've tended to use in the past, and I think a lot of people do, is the general to specific order. Okay, so it's also called the funnel approach, in the sense that you start your literature review with a broad-based research. Okay, so you bring in kind of the history of maybe some, if you're doing a football study, history of football, and maybe it's the main elements of your study, and then as with literature goes down, your literature review goes on, you become very specific with the research you're discussing. So the last journal really should be a journal that is extremely specific to your topic, if not almost identical to the study you're doing, unless obviously you are doing a very unique study in which no one has done before. Okay. The specific to general order is obviously the opposite of that. So starting with the most relevant research first, and then funneling that outwards and becoming more broad. Okay, I personally prefer the general specific order, and that's how I would like you to write your literature review, please. Okay, so after reviewing the literature, so obviously you're going to be doing lots of reading. If you haven't done it already, which you should have done because you did design a study for me. Okay, you're going to summarize what has been done. So everything that you read and used to inform your methodology, you are then going to write that in this literature review for me and explain your thought process as you were doing your methodology. Okay, so explain to me what has not been done, what needs to be done, and why you decided to do your study. Okay, again, remember that everything that we're doing, especially in report writing and justifying why you're doing things, it's about arguing a point. Okay, it's about picking a side and saying what's good and bad about everything that you're reading. So the strengths, the weaknesses, the areas for improvement or areas for development of different types of research. And obviously, at some stage, you are going to have to pick up your own strengths and weaknesses. But remember, you've chose a side. You have to argue that your study is one of the better studies done, and don't beat it up too much. I need another sip of tea, hang on. That's nice. Finally, you need to propose a formal research question or state a hypothesis. Okay, so that should be kind of your closing statement to your literature review. The hypothesis, based on everything that you've talked about, based on all the evidence you've produced for me. Okay, what is your hypothesis? And what do you think is going to happen in your results? Now, obviously, at this point, you will probably know, well, you should know because you've got your results, what your hypothesis or how your research study went. Okay, but you've got to be systematic and scientific with it. What does the research suggest should happen, not what your results are actually showing you. Okay, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you prove or your hypothesis is true or not. It's just what completing the study and what you found. So based on the research you wrote about in literature review, you choose a hypothesis. Okay, so finally, some common mistakes that people make when writing literature reviews. Okay, the review isn't logically organized. Okay, now again, I want you to focus on that broad to specific methodology of writing your literature review. Okay, but making sure it's logically organized and not being all over the place is important, using your paragraphs correctly, etc. The review isn't focused on the most important facets of your study. Okay, so if you are discussing literature that has nothing to do with your study, so if your study is on Lucozade and you're discussing coffee, then that doesn't make any sense. Okay, making sure your review doesn't relate literature to the study. Okay, too few references or outdated references. Remember, all your references need to be within 5 years if possible. Some of you may find that difficult and you might need to go for all the stuff. Okay, but it's something to be wary of when writing it. Okay, have times moved on, as the methodologies outdated, is there new equipment that could be used that you've used instead of what other people have done. Okay, the review isn't written in author's own words. Okay, so make sure you write it, obviously. Plagiarism. The review reads like a series of disjointed summaries. Okay, so trying to make sure that your review is flowing and that every time you discuss a new different research project, that you making sure that there's links between each one. Making sure that your literature review argues a point. So be aware of what your point is and make sure you argue it correctly. Okay, and recent references are omitted. Make sure you put in all your references that you're discussing. Okay, and if you have the most up-to-date research, make sure you put that in. Okay, so don't miss out the 2014-2015 papers. Finally, a quick note on plagiarism. Please, follow these steps here. I won't read them out. Make sure that although you're working in groups, you are not copying each other's work. Okay, that's really important. For some help on writing literature review, if you go to the S3 research tab, once I've actually set it up live, and you go to how to write literature review at the bottom here, you will see the presentation which I've just gone through at the top, and some university PDF files and websites to help you start that, and also to help you be critical in your report writing, how to critique a journal article, and how to read and review a journal article as well. Some excellent questions in this one in particular, which I want you to focus on. Okay. Now, for those people who aren't going to watch this video or aren't going to watch it all the way through, and for those that are, the questions I want you to focus on, please, in your literature review for every article that you read is question 4 here, please. Okay. Question 9, question 10, okay, and question 4 down here, and question 3, sorry, as well. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you're going to find all them easy, but them are the main questions I would like you to answer. Again, with strengths and weaknesses of the reviews. Okay, so those who aren't going to watch this video might struggle with the questions I'm asking for. So please make sure you put them 4 questions in and answer them for every study that you look at. Okay, right, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of students in the past who've got distinctions based around their literature reviews. Well, sorry, distinctions on the whole piece of work, but you know, who produce very good literature reviews. Now there's 2. They're both distinctions, but if you can find a way of all the points I'm going to say now, combining both 1 and 2 examples together and all the points I'm going to mention, then you will be onto an excellent piece of work. Both of these are good, but they could be made better, and I'm going to show you how. Both of the examples I'm going to show you start with a broad base. Okay, so here, the first comment we've made here, the student has looked at the technical and physiological aspects of football. I don't know if you can see, but the research topic is the effect of Lucozade and aldehyde, or whatever it's called, on football performance. So the first thing that they've gone into is the physiological demands of football. Okay, it's a good place to start. It's nice and broad. It's explaining the history of football and what research is done in the past. They then go on to discuss lots of different journals that are based around the physical demands. So we've got Bloomfield, Pollam and O'Donoghue, 2007. We've got Salvo et al. 2007. The referencing is very, very good. Okay, at points throughout this, they are being critical. They are saying the strengths and weaknesses, but that is one of the limitations of this particular example. Okay, they haven't always done that. They haven't always put in strengths and weaknesses, but the amount of references used and the way they put this together is really, really good. Okay, one of the really good things about this piece of work, and I would like to see everyone doing it, please, is putting the results of all the journals that they're discussing. Okay, so it's all well and good just talking about the strengths and weaknesses, but if you're going to be talking about results, please make sure you put in, the p-values if you can find them for the methodology and the results sections. Okay, what they've done well here, okay, is they've started to be more specific. So at the top we've talked about the physiological demands of football. Underneath they've started to be broad on Lucozade. So they've started to bring in the different types of sports drinks that they're discussing. Okay, however, this piece of work is done on tennis players. Now obviously that causes a little bit of controversy because the studies on football and they're looking at a tennis research report. It's not a bad thing, but you've got to be aware that tennis and football, they're not the exact same sports, obviously. Okay, and you need to discuss, why they use tennis. So they could have discussed in here that tennis and football are both explosive sports where they involve some form of aerobic and some form of sprinting. Okay, so that would have been better to tie this together. Okay, they have used excellent results. Okay, they're comparing and contrasting between the journals, although again this could have been better. There could be more links between them to make sure they're good. Okay, and again what they've done at the end here is they've started to look at Lucozade or carbohydrate ingestion on football. So they've gone from talking about the physical demands of football, they've gone from looking at Lucozade in different sports, and then they've made it really, really focused on Lucozade and football. Okay, so that's that broad to specific approach that I want you to look at. I've put a little comment on here. So how could this work be improved further for something you need to think about? Further use of strengths and weaknesses of each study, further connections made between journals and discussing what's the same and different, and a hypothesis will be better at the end. Okay, so I'll go through this one very, very quickly. Okay, all they've done differently really is they've put in more strengths and weaknesses of the study, which you can see here, and they have concluded with a hypothesis based on their research.